money!
Okay, we decided to do another reaction here of the Candybbug Linnea video, where she had comments on Linnea and some other things about Genshin. And I did a reaction on my live stream, and I felt like maybe some of the highlights might be worthy of a peek. I think I have a take that maybe nobody else has on this whole fiasco. So I ask you guys to bear with me and check out what I have to say. And if you find yourself agreeing with me, or even if you find yourself disagreeing, but you're like, fuck it, this guy is even slightly less annoying than Saint or some of the other CCs in the gotcha sphere, please go ahead and smash that subscribe button. It would do my small channel a world of good. Thank you guys so much. Let's get on with the tape.
What side of the discussion do you lean towards? Do you agree more with the points made by the creator? Do you think there is nuance that people are overlooking? Or do you side with the community's rebuttals? Do you think the level of anger we're seeing right now is justified? Let me know in the comments below, and of course don't forget to subscribe if you should be on any of my future videos. Alright, let's get into it. Now, the first point Candybbug said garnered the most backlash revolved around Linnea, and here's what she had to say in the original video.
Over it. Editing Aurelia here. In the process of making this video, Linnea has been released, and I just have to interject to say, what the fuck were they thinking with this character? I feel like a crazy person because I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't think she's adorable and in fact recognizes her for the creepy freak that she is. First of all, she clearly has absolutely no respect for living things that are not traditionally human. She keeps asking to touch and pet the Melusines as if they are not whole people. It's especially creepy because the Melusines are made to look like children. Having an adult character who is high-key obsessed with them and can't treat them as the people they are was a fucked up move on Hoyo's part. Her trailer is sickening for the same reason. She fantasizes about being rubbed up on by Siegewein, who, again, looks like a child, and Kirida, along with other Melusines and Nekomata. It reads as extremely fetishistic to me, which is a problem when the people that she's fantasizing about look like...
Now, this is a very interesting take on Linnea as a character, and if we indeed looked at the Genshin community side of the discussion, you will quickly realize that this is where a huge portion of the backlash really comes from. And one of the biggest rebuttals people made was that Linnea is autism coded. Now, personally, I don't think whether a character is autism coded or not has much bearing on an argument like this. However,
I think for me, part of this is what's crazy about like a lot of this shit just never crosses my fucking mind, dude. I just play the game, and like part of me wonders if like that opinion is just shock value. It's like if I say some wild shit like that she's a fucking, you know, Epstein coded character, that I'll get a bunch of views. It's just shock value. And like my brain just doesn't work that way. Maybe that's why I'm a shitty content creator, because my brain has a hard time just coming up with shock value ideas to put into a video to make it so juicy and appetizing. And you add on top of that this is a female content creator, and no wonder the video, I can already tell why the video has a bunch of views. Just that clip right there is so interesting. Like, I guarantee you pretty much nobody that has played Genshin and went through I didn't think Linnea was adorable and just so cuddly. I didn't think that either. I just thought, oh, this is a pretty cool character. I like her kit. And it looks like she's going to be pretty meta, and she's going to be necessary, or not necessary, but very, very nice to have for Zabai teams. That's all I really thought about the character. I wasn't like, oh, she's raping Melusines. She's a, you know, she's a Jeffrey Epstein confidant. You know, that just like that. But that was the vibe I got when I heard that. I was like, what the fuck? So yeah.
I can still understand why so many people in the community took issues with what Candybbug said, but I don't think it is simply because she was wrong. No, rather, I think she approached the character from an incredibly extreme point of view. And even though we could make the arguments that this is just an anime video game, or point out that Linnea isn't a real person with any agency of her own, I think there's a much more compelling reason why people don't interpret Linnea the same way Candybbug does, and that's is context. The context of the character, the setting she is in, the circumstances surrounding her, the kind of story Genshin is trying to tell, the type of entertainment Genshin Impact is. I mean, I think far too many people underestimate just how important context is when analyzing any character. And to show you what I mean, here's a question. What if we took Linnea exactly as she is, every personality trait, every mannerism, every scene from this trailer, especially this one in particular, and transplanted her into the anime Made in Abyss? An anime whose entire identity revolves around the suffering and abuse of children. What emotion do you think that would evoke within you? Because for me, regardless of how innocent or harmless Linnea may appear, regardless of whether she is autism coded or not, my first reaction wouldn't be that she is cute, it would be fear, it would be disgust. And that is exactly expected, more so because the context surrounding that character has fundamentally changed. And if you've watched Made in Abyss, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But in Genshin Impact, it is completely different. People don't look at Linnea or any character in Genshin Impact and immediately think fetishistic or abusive, because that is simply not what Genshin has ever presented.
He is really dead on about that. Just like, if you think about the very early characters of the game, like Zhangling and Bennett, and just look at all the Mondstadt characters, Sucrose, Diona, these are all like Klee. Klee was okay. Klee and Venti were the first two limited characters, and they were both like they're both essentially like, Venti is like a little twink and Klee is like a little kid, sort of like a little like part animal, part kid. But like, people liked those characters when they were released, and people still mostly really like those characters. It is just the way that this game has always been. Nobody, again, is looking at this from a Jeffrey Epstein point of view. This is not that kind of a video game. This is just a video game. With the thing is, it might not be a Nintendo game. This might not be a game that you download on your Nintendo Switch, but it has that Nintendo charm. It was always originally sold as a re-sleeved Breath of the Wild, right? It's always had that Zelda vibe, that Nintendo vibe, that almost Mario-istic vibe, where you have, you know, androgynous characters like Toad, and you have main characters that are children and, you know, adolescent, you know, prepubescent kids, essentially. And I understand there can be some complications because you also have waifus, and now they've gotten more risque with the waifus, but then they will occasionally, with a character like Linnea, revert back to, you know, like the prepubescent kids or whatever. But most, I think 99.9% of players are not looking at the children through some sort of a sexual lens in the game. So, I don't know. If you are, then, like, you have bigger problems than this, you know, Candybbug content creator. You need to seek help through some sort of a 12-step group or check yourself into a mental hospital.
As. That's not the tone of the game. That's not the narrative being told. Neither the world around Linnea or the situation she's placed in are designed to make the audience feel disgust or anything like that. They're rather designed to come across as wholesome, cute, and daring. And really, this isn't unique to Genshin Impact. I mean, that would be like saying that Methode from Frieren is fetishistic and creepy because she likes giving head pats to smaller girls. Or saying Nami from One Piece is
I love Frieren
because she beats Luffy black and blue whenever he says something incredibly stupid. I mean, sure, you could make those arguments, but almost no one would take them seriously, because everyone understands the intent behind those scenes. They're meant to be cute, they're meant to be funny, and context is what allows the audience to recognize that. The next part that garnered a huge amount of attention and criticism was the discussion surrounding
I love this dude's voice. It makes me think of the Little Mermaid. Under the sea, life is much better down where it's wetter. Take it from me. Well, in the day we play in the sand, we are a hot crustacean band. Man, it's a better life is much better under the sea. Do 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 do.
In Natlan and Sumer, with Candybbug specifically saying that she was called racist over some of the things she said about these two regions. Now, before we even get into what she actually said.
Poor timing there, the racism. After I just did the under the sea. Well, it's not racist. I mean, Sebastian was voiced by like an African singer dude. He might have been Nigerian. I don't know. I'm not really making a statement either way about that, but yeah.
I think there's something much more frustrating that needs to be addressed. The idea that giving criticism towards certain elements within Natlan or Sumeru somehow gets someone labeled with all these terms, but not the game itself. There's a reason that whenever I've talked about cultural representation in Genshin Impact, I've deliberately narrowed the conversation down to accents. The absolute bare minimum, the least these games can give to bring out some semblance of culture into these regions. Because the moment you spend any real time in these regions, or do even a little bit of research into the cultures they're inspired by, you quickly realize that there are plenty of legitimate criticisms to be made about how they're depicted. I mean, have you ever wondered why Natlan and Sumeru are the only regions in Genshin Impact that mash together so many completely different cultures and traditions into one single nation? Something you don't see in literally any other region. I mean, Mondstadt is primarily German inspired, Lyra is Chinese, Inazuma is Japanese, Fontaine is French, Shineznaya is Russian. But when we get into Sumeru and Natlan, the regions inspired by cultures outside Europe and East Asia, the approach suddenly changes. I mean, Sumeru alone pulls inspiration from India, Egypt, Persia, Mesopotamia, Iraq, the Middle East, North America, all within a single nation. And then Natlan brings together inspiration from Mesoamerica, South America, West Africa, East Africa, Oceania, and Polynesia. Again, all within one single nation. And I have to ask the obvious question.
Oceania.
Why? Why is it that these are the only regions where so many distinct cultures are compressed into one nation? And even more so, why is it that despite drawing inspiration from regions whose population are overwhelmingly darker skinned, the overwhelming majority of playbook characters are still fair skinned? I mean, saying the quiet part out loud, every single one of us understand the realities of the gacha markets. Most of us don't go into these games expecting perfect cultural representation, especially in Genshin Impact. I mean, I certainly don't. And if you do, well, it is a matter of time before you learn. Now, bringing it back to the Candybbug's video, I genuinely find it jarring that someone could be labeled racist for pointing out something that is, at the very least in this instance, objectively observable. Here's what she had to say, not even about Natlan, but rather its Archon, Mavrika.
Wise. Now think about Mawika in the same way, with regards to her divine ideal, which is war. How does she represent war? Well, she's fighting a war against the Abyss, like everybody else in Teyvat. Yeah, maybe they have it worse than other nations, but still, what happens when the war ends? Which it does at the end of the Archon quest. It's not like Mawika is some battle-crazed maniac. At most, she's just kind of thoughtless and reckless in her actions. Do you see how war doesn't really work as a divine ideal, and least of all with Mawika as its representative? Also, it's a nation of war made up of 6 different factions, and yet there's absolutely no conflict between them. It really just doesn't make any sense. This is why I personally always thought it would be cool if the Pyro Archon was a villain to her people. Maybe she makes them fight each other gladiator style for her own entertainment, and then maybe we would have a better rebellion storyline than Inazuma with an Archon.
I think the outrage surrounding Mavrika, at least with respect to this particular point, is extremely performative because she is not wrong. I mean, right now, I don't think it is controversial at all to say that Mavrika is possibly the most boring Archon in Genshin Impact. And the reason for this all comes down to one thing that most of us already understand about her. She is too perfect. I mean, she's righteous enough to completely despise war, despite literally being the god of war. She is farsighted enough to make a plan 500 years in advance and somehow have it play out almost exactly as intended, with little to no course correction along the way. She's an exceptional leader. She learns incredibly quickly. She adapts to every situation. She always seems to be the smartest person in the room and rarely feels like she's genuinely out of her depth. And I think what is most disappointing about Mavrika is that I genuinely don't believe this was the character the game originally intended to build. In fact, there's a single line from another Archon that to me perfectly captures what Mavrika was supposed to be.
The Pyro Archon is a wayward, warmongering wretch, and the Geo Archon is a brutish, blundering buffoon. How do I know? Because this is written in the epic book.
Wayward, warmongering wretch. Now that is an interesting way to describe an Archon. And ironically, I think that is exactly the kind of characterization that would have made both Mavrika and Natlan make far more sense. I mean, imagine an impulsive, brash, almost unnerving Archon who genuinely loves battle. An Archon who actually embodies the ideal she represents, war.
Yeah, they are not wrong about that. I still don't really understand what her point, or I guess I take her point. I don't understand how that made her racist, though.
I mean, every other Archon is allowed to meaningfully express the ideals they stand for. So why is the God of War the one who seems furthest removed from hers? Going forward, though, I also think an Archon like that would have solved so many issues people had with Natlan as a whole. I mean, this is supposed to be the nation of war. Yes, one tribe is primarily known for surfing, another is known for dancing. And while individually there is nothing wrong with these ideas, when you step back and look at the nation as a whole, it just doesn't fit the identity that
this guy
nation
kind of
itself
annoys
spends
me.
years
I should have just
building
gone to
up.
her
There's a
video.
disconnect between what Natlan was sold to us as, and also Sumeru's desert, where Nefer grew up in and the story takes place in, is a place that is supposed to represent the setting of darker skinned people. So if Genshin actually wanted to depict that experience in a meaningful way, wouldn't it have been better to reflect that reality? And yes, I can already imagine the counter argument. Well, at least Genshin chose to tell this story in the first place. But my rebuttal is very simple. Sometimes it is better not to tell a story at all than to tell it poorly. It's better not to tackle a sensitive subject than to handle it in a way that feels sanitized, watered down, completely disconnected from the reality it is trying to portray. And really, this is a criticism I think applies to Genshin more often than it should, whether it is this storyline or what they did with Ian-san, a character they advertised as the face of Natlan nearly 6 years ago, only for her to end up being one of the most irrelevant playable characters in the entire nation. I mean, what exactly am I supposed to appreciate? Whether we're talking about the nation itself or the characters within it, it is hard not to feel like so much of it was half-assed. Now, moving on to the final point of controversy in Candybbug's video, and that has to do with the female characters in Genshin Impact, specifically how they're dressed and how they're written. And honestly, the community's reaction to this part was probably the most confusing thing I saw throughout this entire discussion. Mostly because this is the conversation the Genshin community itself has been having for a long time. I mean, we saw it all the way back when Laoma was introduced, when people argued that the way she was dressed had absolutely nothing to do with her personality or the way she was portrayed, that it was simply fan service. Or in a more recent example, we saw that same conversation with Sandrone. I mean, people hated the fact that Polonia was removed and replaced with whatever this is. And even
I think this is interesting, right? I think this is a really important time to stop and smell the roses for a minute and like make the point that every gacha game you could say that about. I mean, Wuthering Waves, basically not every character, but like I would say 80 to 90% of female characters are dressed like skanks, and a lot of times it's not super like explainable, or it's not representative of their personality per se, but nobody cares about that. Like, why is this dude making this point? I'm sure she's gonna make the point, and maybe she'll make it in a different way, and maybe I'll have something to say about that, I guess. But, like, I don't have a problem with any of the, like, I just don't think about that. Again, I'm just that's why I think a lot of this stuff is just for shock value. It's like, I'm going to say something that's so outrageous that a lot of people will get all ginned up, and then, you know, it will get shared, it will get reacted to, and then suddenly my channel's going to blow the fuck up. Obviously, there is always a component of that. Even from like established creators like this dude, I just think like that's a weird thing to say, because all these games do that. Now, I understand that if you go earlier to my reaction to this, I was talking about how Genshin has also always had kind of the Nintendo charm, and they've had the kid-friendly thing, but like we also have had the waifu element for a long time as well. It's been there. You had it with the Shogun, you know, from 2.0 or whenever. I mean, she was in the storyline at 2.0, but was released shortly after that. You know, you had it with characters in Liyue even. It, as the game progressed, the waifu element became a bigger deal, I think. But it is that way. I mean, if you look at some of the newer gacha games, it's like really overt. Like Mongol Star Dive, they literally just basically had, so they had two characters that came out in 1.0 and now in 1.2, they're in 1.2 or 1.3 now. It's basically two 1.0 characters released as limited characters, but like slut versions. It's summer limited version. So they're standard 5-star characters that have a limited slut edition where they're wearing like underwear basically, or skimpy bikini, you know. So go check that out. Like if you really have a problem with Lauma and her attire, go check out these. and like one of the characters, I'm talking about Mongol Stardive here. One of the characters, it does kind of make sense because it's Frances, and she is like this. She's like a love doctor, and she's just like horny as fuck all the time. She's just running around trying to fuck everything that walks. But the other character is the female main character, and she's like very asexual. She is very buttoned up, and she's wearing like a full, you know, like long sleeves and pants, and then in 1.0 she is, and then in 1.2 she's just in a bikini with her tits, like suddenly her tits are way bigger, and she's just like this giant whore on the limited banner. So like, trust me, it gets way worse than this, is all I'm saying. So I just think this is fucking shock value, you know.
More so, they hated that our outfit was changed from a more traditional, fully covered design into the classic body-revealing female Genshin outfits. And if you want an even more recent example, look at the Snezhnaya trailer. I mean, there was an entire discussion across the community about why the female gods had exposed legs, while the male gods were wearing full trousers, or why the Sarita herself was wearing a miniskirt instead of the kind of long regal gown people expect from the ruler of Snezhnaya. These are not new criticisms. The community has...
Because these games, all of the gacha games, are played by a bunch of fucking gooners. A bunch of losers that have never had sex, they've never been laid, and they love looking at digital titties. Okay? That's why. That's it. That is the fucking answer. Okay? I know that you want there to be some deeper... like just some deeper explanation. No, it's sex sells. It's the same reason that Lady Gaga comes out. It's the same reason Lady Gaga has always been a whore, so it's not a great example, but like Miley Cyrus, it's the same reason that Miley Cyrus, when she turned like 22 and finally got away from her dad controlling her or whatever and stopped doing Hannah Montana, suddenly the slut was on and she's doing the wrecking ball music video, swinging around, whatever. You know, it's just how it is. This is the world. This is the world we live in. It terrifies me for my, you know, I have a 9-year-old daughter. Terrifies me. Really does terrify me. Anyways.
Been making these arguments for years, and not just about the characters I've mentioned. So why does the criticism suddenly become unacceptable the moment someone outside the community points it out? And when we move beyond the character designs and start talking about how Genshin writes its female characters, I also think there's a lot of truth in what Candybbug is saying. I mean, take Columbina for example, a character that went from being this mysterious, almost unsettling figure with seemingly limitless potential to, in many ways, feeling like this airhead cutie damsel waiting for the traveler to save her. Or Sandrone, who initially came across as this detached, calculating inventor, the person that made all the Catherines in Genshin Impact, only to end up feeling like yet another tsundere. Then you have Mavrika, as I already pointed out, whose defining trait seems to be that she is simply
her birthday is today.
Perfect, or Citlali, whose personality gradually gets watered down into little more than the jealous girlfriend archetype. I mean, these are criticisms that people have had with Genshin's females writing for a long time, and what makes them stand out even more is that you don't see the same pattern nearly as often with the male cast. I mean, the male characters tend to have far more distinct personalities that vary significantly from one another, rather than falling into the same handful of archetypes. And even when they do fall into similar archetypes, the game still makes sure to put in that one thing in their character that makes them different and memorable. Like take Lohen and Tortaglia, for example. Both of them fall into the battle seeker archetype.
And so honestly, I think that's probably enough out of him for me. I like, as much as I ever listen to any content creators and their criticisms or opinions, about any of these gacha games, it's like, I mean, I do think it's crazy to like straight up like shit on someone and you know, apparently this girl who's a pretty new creator, as Mr. Nigerian has implied, is receiving death threats or something. I don't know. I don't really know the full story there, but that's obviously ridiculous and crazy. And I can call someone retarded or say that their opinions are ridiculous or stupid or whatever. I think Mr. Nigerian's opinions are pretty asinine as well, and I don't even think those are his actual opinions. I think a lot of it is just, again, shock value. If you don't have like an outrageous opinion about, you know, the latest thing in the game, whether it's like the biggest tits in the game or whatever, then, you know, suddenly it's like, holy fuck, what are, blah, 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 you know, you're not going to have anything to talk about. So I think that there has to be something to be disgusted about and to bang your fist on the and to get people riled up. Otherwise, you're boring. And, you know, like I said, maybe that's why I have a hard time, because I just play the damn game because I like it. I like talking about it. I'm just a guy with a fucking camera. So what do I know? Anyways, good night.